Ladies and gentlemen, joining me now for this special Adam versus the Man late night interview from somewhere in the mountains of Colorado is my good friend Joby Weeks, a snowboarder, a entrepreneur, a activist, and someone that you'd always love to sit down and have a toke with. I know I'm on my way to Colorado next week to speak at CSU, but I couldn't wait for it, Joby, so here you go. This toke's for you.
Awesome, Adam. How's it going, bro? Iron Lung, we'll call you. Hey, Adam, you got to check out this piece that I just got. It's an elephant, but it's a pipe. The only reason I'm smoking out of this pipe, Adam, is because Ron Paul. There would be no way I'd be smoking out of a Republican pipe otherwise.
Is it a Republican pipe, or is it just a pipe that looks like an elephant, Joby? I have a feeling that that pipe does not have the official endorsement of the Republican Party, nor are you speaking on behalf of the Republican Party while holding that pipe, I might add. No?
Maybe not the Republican Party, but Ron Paul does have a bill to legalize marijuana on the national level and repeal all this these mandates. You know, government getting us out of the business of violating the 10th Amendment. Let the states to decide. So yeah, it's an elephant. It reminds me of Ron Paul.
Excellent.
Since he is a 12-term Republican congressman.
Excellent. But now you have an interesting marijuana situation in Colorado right now, because you guys have been really rapidly catching up to California on the cutting edge of marijuana legalization. And in some places, you've been leading the way, where you had decriminalization in Boulder, at least, right? Full decriminalization like a year ago. How's that going now?
Well, anybody can do it anywhere around the country. All they got to do is just stop smoking pot for 2 months and get off the couch and get motivated. That's basically what we did. Is we drafted up a petition here in the mountains, and I went around from the banks to the grocery store. I stood in front of the post office for like 2 hours a day for about 2 months, collecting signatures. It was a ballot initiative, and then we got enough signatures to get on the ballot for the election, and 76% of the town voted yes to legalize marijuana, not just for medical patients, but for everybody. So you don't even have to have a license to have marijuana up here. So anyways, that was kind of a no-brainer for me. I couldn't understand why tobacco, which kills 500,000 people, is legal, and alcohol, which kills 100,000 people a year, is legal. I mean, Advil kills like 6,000 people, and Coffee kills 10,000 people a year, yet in the last 4,000 years, no one has died from marijuana. And
although I have heard that a few people manage to smoke pot, then go on YouTube and make asses of themselves.
True, but yeah, and sometimes people smoke pot, and I don't know, they do stupid stuff and they die, but that's not a pot death. That's like I smoked pot and then tried to jump out of an airplane without a parachute or something. That, you know, it doesn't really count as a marijuana death. So
in that count, when you're talking about stupidity deaths, I think that's the greatest argument for the superior safety of marijuana, because at least compared to the dominant social drug of our day, which is still alcohol, which lowers the inhibitions, like inhibitions that keep you from doing really stupid stuff.
Right. Well, you never heard about the guy that, you know, came home after smoking pot and beat his wife and his kids, but you always hear about that with alcohol.
Right.
And,
right. Well, yeah. There are no violent stoners. It's very true. But
no.
you said you've got a new business venture, or there's a, I'm sorry. Before we get to that, there's something now threatening marijuana freedom in Colorado, in Boulder specifically. There's a new tax with 10%. How is this being imposed?
A week ago they voted to tax us some more. So these poor dispensaries not only had to pay all this money to get their license and go through all these hoops and regulations, giving people jobs that shouldn't exist in the first place, but now they want to add another 10%, and they did just pass that, actually. So it's a little disappointing, but, you know, some people are like, we need to regulate it like, you know, tobacco and alcohol. I mean, if you don't want to pay the alcohol tax, don't drink. You don't want to pay the tobacco tax, don't smoke. If you don't want to pay the marijuana tax, grow your own, and then you don't have to
Well, it's a
tax.
really sad statement about this issue, because even though it's something that's really powerful in waking people up, the marijuana issue, a lot of people come to a better understanding of government and the current tyranny that does legitimately exist in the United States, that the government, and it doesn't matter if it's about marijuana or alcohol or cigarettes or prescription drugs. I mean, if you look at how the FDA over just the few decades that it's really been manipulating the drug approval process, how many deaths they have caused by keeping experimental drugs from terminally ill patients that would have worked, and by putting drugs on the market that have been demonstrated to be unsafe and sometimes completely unnecessary. So it's about self-ownership in the most direct sense. Do you own your body? And as much as people are waking up to that because the government says you can't smoke pot, and it happens to be about as popular as alcohol is, okay, well, maybe not quite, but it's obviously a very popular substance in this country, and certainly a traditional American pastime at this point, smoking marijuana, as we suspect our founders did, as we knew they were big fans of hemp, the Constitution itself having been written on hemp paper. And the people that are really waking up to the message of liberty through self-ownership, because they go, holy crap, the government says I can't smoke pot, and I know they're full of shit when they throw all these bullshit statistics at me, when they tell me it's a threat to my health, all of these things. And still, where it's legalized more than anywhere else in America, really in Boulder, Colorado, it still is fit into this paradigm of you don't really own property, where you don't really have economic freedom. You're buying and selling marijuana. We still can say we're going to take 10% because we say so.
Well, I mean, it's an indirect tax, and it's avoidable. It's not like the income tax where they truly do imply that they own you, because you can't really avoid that like you can the marijuana, alcohol, and tobacco tax. They basically say, yeah, we own you, and we'll give you back the crumbs, the fruits of your labor. We're going to take a chunk of it. They take just enough to where we might revolt, and we let them take just enough so that we don't revolt or something. But anyways, yeah, I believe that the marijuana issue is a very easy issue, because if anybody spends 5 minutes looking at it, you realize that it's obviously a conspiracy, if you will, to block the legalization, to keep it illegal. I mean, Henry Ford built a car that was 40 times stronger than steel out of hemp. It ran on hemp, which is 50% cellulose, so you can make gasoline out of it. You know, the clothing, the textiles, I mean, they didn't want to compete with the hemp. Hemp was destroying the cotton business. Let's just put it that way in terms of clothes and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, if anyone looks into it and they realize, okay, the government lied to us about this, what else does it lie to us about? And then you dig a little bit into the Fed, for instance. I got this bumper sticker here. You know, and you learn the difference between cash, currency, coin, and credit, and what a note is. I learned that a note is a legal contract that has to have a maker, a payee, a due date, and a dollar amount. So the old money used to say this note is payable to the bearer on demand, $10 in gold. So it had the maker, the United States, the payee, the bearer, the due date on demand, and the value, which is $10 in gold. So that's what a note was.
It would actually, wouldn't it say a specific amount, measurable amount of gold, not just $10 worth? It would say a measure in ounces.
Well, no. A dollar is like a gram or a pound or an ounce. It's a formal guarantee on what a coin weighs.
So they had the dollar fixed to gold.
Well, no, a dollar was so many grains of gold or so many grains of silver.
Right, okay.
So it's a dollar literally is a weight. And they've gotten us confused that maybe a dollar is 20 nickels or 100 pennies or 4 quarters. But no, it's just a formal guarantee of what a coin weighs in gold or silver. And, you know, gasoline, I always tell people, gasoline is still only 20 cents a gallon. When my dad was growing up, he was paying 25 cents a gallon for gas. Now it's 20 cents a gallon. So the price of gas has actually dropped. People say, well, what do you mean? I just paid $4 for a gallon of gas. I said, no, you didn't. If you pay with pre-1963 dimes, you're paying 20 cents a gallon. You're paying with fiat paper currency that loses its value every day because of the Federal Reserve creating billions and trillions of dollars out of thin air, bailing out foreign banks and propping up the euro, blah, blah, blah. You're getting robbed. Inflation is a tax. And the only way you can avoid that tax, like, you know, avoiding the marijuana tax and the alcohol tax and all the other indirect taxes, is to vote with your wallet and stop using their money. I mean, I see people all the time, they're protesting about, oh, Walmart this and blah, blah, blah. Well, if you see a guy holding a sign outside of Walmart one day and the next day shopping there, that's kind of hypocritical, you know? But we see a lot of people out there marching against the Fed. I mean, they got the idea right. The Fed's the problem. These poor Occupy Wall Street people. You're like, over there, guys. The Federal Reserve is over there. They're the ones that create the money and the bubbles and the bailouts and the business.
Make it all possible.
They socialize the losses and they privatize the profits and rip us off. So the Fed's the issue. You got to vote with your wallet and stop using their money. There's nothing more hypocritical than preaching out against the Fed but continuing to use their money. And so that's another venture of mine that we've been doing, is we've created a barter.
Hold on. Before we move on from this, I want to say, because we've got finally a candidate who represents this in Ron Paul, who understands the basic concept of money and is willing to talk about it like no other candidate will. And that this fundamental principle of economic freedom, if you don't get this, if you're running for president or any federal office and you don't fundamentally understand this and want to restore the power of currency to the American people, you are unqualified to hold that office. You know, it doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
You can still be a socialist even. You can still be Bernie Sanders and Senator Sanders from Vermont, self-proclaimed socialist, who has reached out across the aisle. He happens to be an elected Democrat, but reached out across the aisle on the Federal Reserve issue because he gets that it is the worst scam, the worst fundamental ripoff that our government supports. But I've always thought that, at least in the long run, government will end when people finally take that, after taking that 1 foot out and slowly shifting their weight out of the system, when everybody's able to just pick up that last bit of dependence and step away from the violence, step away from the organized coercion of government, that's how government's going to end. And it's going to be based on people changing the paradigm and making the kind of independent decisions that you're talking about. And your new venture is based on this. Your new venture...
Well, you know, Ron Paul passed the Free Competition and Currency Act, which basically repeals the legal tender laws, which force companies and individuals to accept this fake money that they're spending into the economy, these fiat Federal Reserve notes. You know, legal tender laws, they force a lot of people to take that in payments for their goods and services, and that's what gives it value, as a government force. So, yeah, I'm like an anarcho-capitalist. I'm a voluntarist. I like to associate and disassociate, which I believe our First Amendment right. It gives us the freedom. Well, it doesn't give us the freedom. It's just
supposed to protect that freedom from the government.
Yeah, it's the chain on the government from violating our rights. I mean, that's what it basically should have been called, the document of thou shalt not. You can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And the 10th Amendment, you know, if we missed anything, you can't do that either. So it's really to bound government and allow us to express ourselves and do business with who we want to do business in whatever form of currency we want. If I decided I wanted to start mowing people's lawns and I came to your house and said, Adam, could I mow your lawn? And you said, well, sure, but I don't pay you. I'm not going to pay you in Federal Reserve notes. I'll pay you in beer. You know, so I mow your lawn and you give me some beer. I mean, that's a legitimate contract, and we're allowed to enter agreements. And the government's role is to enforce contracts and protect us from fraud and protect our rights. You know, and so that's why we've created this barter network, and we're trying to literally never use Federal Reserve notes for anything and just trade amongst ourselves, fellow like-minded libertarian idealists, if you will. And so trading in gold and silver, because you can't print silver out of thin air, you know, so it doesn't lose its value. You know, I mean, even in the Bible, 1 ounce of gold would buy you 400 loaves of bread 2,000 years ago, and today 1 ounce of gold will buy you 400 loaves of bread. So, you know, prices don't really change commodity for commodity, and that's what we've decided to launch. Is it's called networkbartering.com. So like network bartering. So we're a barter network, and that domain was already taken. So anyways, if you go there, you can see some of the cool coins. We got like 36 different currencies, and we've got a list of all the merchants that accept our money for their goods and services that we trade with. And we've got a great customer referral program. So if you refer a couple of friends, you get all your silver or gold for free, depending on, basically you get paid for whatever they buy. So you get like an override commission. So, what I'm doing is I just have a monthly thing getting taken out of my account every month, so that my mailbox, I get silver in my mailbox every month. And I'm telling my friends, hey, prepare for the hyperinflation that Ron Paul's been talking about. Prepare for it. Everybody should be getting some silver every single month, even if it's only an ounce a month. Everybody should stock up a little bit, as well as gold and bullets and ammo and food and guns and all these other commodities with intrinsic value. So they always say that your brass and lead will protect your gold and silver. So anyways, so that's what we've got going on. If you check out networkbartering.com. Hold on, I gotta visit my my Ron Paul pipe really quick. This one's
really?
for you, Adam.
Well, while you're doing that, let me just make it clear to the audience that this interview does not in any way constitute an endorsement of mowing lawns while drunk. I think that's a kids don't try that at home.
Yeah, but you know what that makes me think of, Adam, is the government, the Constitution, all this, the Supreme Court has held that we own ourselves. So if we own ourselves, we own our time, right? So commodity for commodity, if you give me a $20 bill and I give you two $10 bills back, is there any gain? There's not any gain. There's an even exchange. You gave me a 20 and I gave you two 10s. So there's no gain. Well, according to the Supreme Court, income is a gain from like corporate activity. So if I trade you a 20 for two 10s, there is no gain, there would be no income, there would be no tax. So if I own myself and I own my time, and that time is property, and I trade you my time for an hour to mow your lawn, for your property, which would be your Corona, there would be no income. So there would be no tax. Instead of Corona, if you gave me an ounce of gold for my hour, or an ounce of silver for my hour of time to mow your lawn, would there be a gain? No, I'm just trading my commodity for your commodity, property per property. It's an even exchange with no gain, with no income, which means there would be no tax.
Well, what's sad is that this has become not just the global reserve currency, but something that is dominated as a medium of exchange, the US dollar as we know it, where we all pay the inflation tax by holding dollar bills at any moment. But we also, it helps to almost step back and see that all of the interactions, all the voluntary interactions, all these barter interactions, the majority of human relationships are voluntary. They're not based on a system that is forced on people. They're not based on the coercion of the Federal Reserve, which has now come to be accepted with relatively little coercion. I mean, it's still fundamentally based on a taxation system imposed by force that is not just tied to the dollar, but disadvantages gold and silver economically by comparison. And we see that the advantage of living this by these values, living by the values of voluntarism as much as possible, and making sure that we, in as best we can in our own lives, aren't supporting systems that we condemn morally. Joey, thanks for all the great work you're doing, and thanks for sitting down and having a talk with me tonight.
Absolutely, Adam. Thanks again for having me. I love your show, bro.
See you next week. Ladies and gentlemen, Joby Weeks from somewhere in the mountains in Colorado.